A Planet's Ransom, Chapter 23. Back at Su-Lynn's. I didn't know what to expect when I came to again. I don't think I expected anything. I certainly didn't expect to find myself wrapped in a foil blanket with Mitch's jacket under my head. Great, you are awake. Well, that wasn't Mitch, and it took me a minute to work out who, even with the accent. Saeed? I turned my head, but Saeed had already turned away. Mitch, he shouted, turning back just as I decided I'd been lying down long enough. Hey! I ignored his protest as I shoved the blanket back and tried to sit up. That hurt. I stopped, but I didn't lie back down. Hey, what do you think you're doing? That was Mitch. I ignored him too and managed to get upright, even if I was still on my butt. Gotta find Blossom. And Su-Lynn, I said, and watched him frown. So I kept going. Gotta get to the transmitter. Call for help. Mitch put a hand on my shoulder as I tucked my legs to get my feet under me and shoved the blanket aside. I reached up to push his hand away. Got to get to home, I said, trying to move Mitch's hand and failing. Got to find Taylor. I swatted at Mitch's hand again. Lie down, he said, as I wriggled my shoulder out from under his grip and wondered why my ribs hurt so much. No time, I told him, and rolled into a crouch, getting ready to get to my feet, which of course was when he poked me in the ribs. I couldn't help it. I yelped and then folded. You son of a... You know the Evenats don't like that kind of language, he said, and pulled the blanket back over me. In case you hadn't noticed, it's still night time. I hadn't, and I was cross, and I really, really hurt, and I couldn't think straight. I very slowly uncurled, and Mitch watched me. I wished he wouldn't. It hurt enough that I wanted to cry, and I couldn't do that with him staring. You need a painkiller? He asked, and I stopped moving. You think that's going to work? Saeed came into view, and I realized he'd moved away and come back. I wondered why until he handed Mitch a drink bottle and a packet of tablets. What are they? I asked, and seeing them, I remembered I hadn't been issued with painkillers. Where'd you get them from? He punched two out of the packet and handed them to me, letting me prop myself up to take them, and then handing me the bottle. As I washed them down, he glanced at Saeed. You think these will be enough? And Saeed shook his head. I thought you might need this, he said, producing a hypoderm he'd been holding out of sight. I choked on my water and started to shift away, but Mitch grabbed me by the wrist and pulled me back. It's a painkiller, he said, not a poison. But where'd you get it? I'm a grown-up, remember? Yeah, sure he was. He ignored my look and I kept talking. Yeah, sure he was. He ignored my look and kept talking, reaching back to take the derm from Saeed's hand. Even Natch medical training built on what the army had already taught me. Oh, yeah, I'd forgotten that. I watched as he hit the trigger mechanism on the side of the derm, heard the whine as it warmed up. What is that? I asked, trying to pull away as he pressed its broad, flat end against my skin. More painkiller. Great. Now I could have painkiller on top of my painkillers. I wondered how that was going to affect me, and then I realized the hypoderm was pressing against my skin. My bare skin. Bare skin. On my shoulder. I stared at Mitch's face as the realization hit, heard the hiss of the hypoderm as it activated, felt a myriad of fine-tipped needles punch through that skin and release the painkiller. Where's my shirt? I asked, and Mitch blushed, but he didn't let go of my arm. I had to take it off to bandage your ribs. My ribs. I stared at him, feeling my face grow hot as my cheeks coloured, registering the tighter than clothing press of bandages around my chest and the way Saeed had turned his back to me. Nice of him. I glared at Mitch, and he stared back. It's nothing personal, he said, as his face returned to its normal colour. You took a kicking, I bandaged you up. There were so many things I could say to that, but I didn't let a single one of them pass my teeth. I really didn't know what to say. Thank you was so far out of the question, it wasn't even a star in the very distant sky, and anything about the view was just too wrong to contemplate. Right, I said, making sure the blanket was pulled up tight over my bra and feeling very grateful I still had that. And that was when I registered just how dizzy and tired I was starting to feel. Phew, son, I managed as my eyes closed and I fell off the world for the second time that day. The next time I woke, it was Mitch sitting beside me, and it was light, and I realized we were in a cave that looked kind of familiar. I lay there for a moment trying to get my bearings, and then I knew I was back in Su-Lynn's cavern. How do we get here? I asked, when what I really wanted to know was how I'd managed to get there. You know, from wherever we'd been before. Fortunately, Mitch understood. I built a travoy, and we dragged you most of the way. Most? Well, the travoy leaves tracks, another voice chipped in, so he made us carry it the last few kilometres so it wouldn't. Taylor? Hi, crazy girl. Crazy girl? Since when was I crazy girl? And then your communicator went off just when we thought we'd heard the heritage coming, so we answered it just to shut it up, and it was David. I nearly smashed it, Mitch said, but Saeed grabbed it first and got David on the line. I've been wondering where he was if he wasn't with you. I stared up at him, stared past him, looking for the other faces in the room. David? I asked, and he stepped into view. Hi. When did you... I stopped, realizing he didn't know about Su-Lynn. Just as these guys were about to walk into Su-Lynn's camp. He caught my horrified look and grinned a very short grin. It's okay, I stopped them, got them into the cave before they got caught. Before I could say anything, Mitch picked up a small pile of clothing that had been set on the floor beside him. Here, he said, passing it over to me. You'll need to get dressed. Which was about when I realized I still didn't have a shirt and that I needed the toilet. Mitch must have been a bit of a mind reader because he pointed to the door in the cave wall. It's over there, he said, and stood up. We won't look. I watched as he turned around and moved away to a different part of the room, and then I saw that the four of them were all standing with their backs to me. Cool, I thought, but I didn't move straight away. Well, hurry up, Mitch said. We can't stand here like this all day. We've got stuff to do. Well, sure they did, but I got moving, surprised to find I didn't hurt anywhere near as much as I had before, even if I was still wrapped up like a mummy. And keep those bandages on, Mitch called as I walked across the room to the door in the wall. You still need them. I did, huh? And don't get them wet. I wondered how I'd get them wet, but decided to do as he said. I might be in charge and all, but he'd had more medical training than I did, so it might be a good idea to listen. I shut the door behind me, glad to find I was in a proper bathroom style setup. I'd known the pods came with showers and had had their own water recycling unit for showering. I just hadn't realized exactly how fluid they were when it came to setting themselves up in a more permanent way. I was really glad Su-Lynn's keeper had managed to get her under cover before the Heritage had found her. Which reminded me, I had to hurry. The Heritage had found Su-Lynn, and they were planning on eating her and Blossom. I only hoped the lizards were going to wait until they'd caught the rest of us before they started. With that thought to hurry me along, it didn't take me too long to get cleaned and dressed, and I was really glad Mitch had warned me about not getting the bandages wet. I'd been thinking of getting into the shower when I'd remembered I couldn't take them off, so I'd had to settle for a good sponge down with a wet washcloth instead. Things still hurt, and as baths went, it wasn't very satisfying, but it would do. When I was as clean as I could get, I got into the clean clothes he'd obviously taken from my pack and stepped back into the main chamber. The smell of whatever the boys had cooked up out of Su-Lynn's supplies was fantastic, and I hurried over to where they'd laid things out on a large table in one corner. Mitch looked up as I crossed the room. Well, you look a lot better, he said, handing me a plate. We have to, I started, but he cut me off. Shut up and eat, he said. Su-Lynn and Blossom are still alive, and the Heritage are out looking for us. Relieved to know that the Heritage really were going to try to get us all together before they ate us, I shut up and looked around for a seat. I didn't see any, so I sat on the floor like before. Mitch took a sheet of paper off the table and led the others over to join me. We've got a bit of a plan, he said. Tell us what you think of it.